Great, we are live. What a wonderful panel that we have got over here. Hi everyone, welcome back to Spartan Summit 2026. I'm Kavya and I'll be moderating this panel discussion. Before we get started, please feel free to support the panel using emojis below. We want to make sure that these sessions and panel discussions are as engaging as possible. You can of course use the chat to share your thoughts and Q&A section to drop your comments and questions. And we'll of course bring some of them into the conversation towards the end of the session if the time permits. Also, please don't forget to share your key learnings with your network on LinkedIn using Spartans and Spartan Summit. Anyway, let me just get started with it. Very excited for this panel discussion. Today's discussion focuses on a shift many quality engineering teams are currently experiencing. So, 2025 felt like the year of experimentation with AI. However, you could of course must have seen that teams tried Copilot, AI-driven test generation, different tool across their testing workflows. But as we enter into 2026, that conversation has evolved into something very transformative. Teams are no longer just experimenting with AI, they are trying to operationalize it across their engineering pipelines. So, this panel discussion primarily explores how organizations are moving from AI pilots to real adoption in quality engineering. And, no best folks to talk about it than those who are already implementing it within their organizations and teams. We'll discuss practical use cases and also, figure out how testing strategies are evolving. What are the matrices that matter in today's age, and the cultural shift that is required to make AI a reliable part of modern testing workflows. So let me just get started with the introduction of all the panelists that you see over here today. First, we have Harinee Muralinath, director at Thoughtworks, who works at the intersection of engineering quality, security practices, and organizational culture. Next, we have Jaydeep Chakrabarty, Director of AI at Piramal Finance, leading enterprise AI initiatives and building scalable AI-driven platforms in regulated environments. We also have Rahul Parwal, a globally recognized testing expert, award-winning test specialist, author, and an active voice in the international testing community. And of course, we have Siddhant Wadhwani, engineering manager SDET at Newfold Digital, who's leading global automation teams and building scalable quality engineering systems across multiple products. Thank you all for joining us today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kavya.
So to this wonderful panel, right, let's start the conversation, jump straight into it. So 2025, as I was saying earlier, it felt like the year of experimentation with AI. And as we move into 2026, teams are, of course, figuring out how to move towards real adoption of AI across their testing workflows and broader SDLC per se, right? From your experience, what are the key changes teams have made to turn these AI experiments into reliable day-to-day engineering practices? So, who could perhaps, Harini, we could start with you. What are your thoughts on it?
Okay. Yeah, sure. First of all, hi everyone. It's really great to be here, and I think the panel is amazing. I'm just very honored to be amongst all of you. And back to your question, I think I totally agree that 2025 really was AI experimentation, and I think it was great. It was great that we started with experimentation, but as we have headed into, like, let's say towards end of 2025 and now in 2026, as we are still in the early months, I think we have stopped treating AI as just the the cool kid on the block, and we are looking at more engineering system focus, and putting more structure around it. So I think I think one of the first things that we all must have realized in our organizations is that organizations are becoming very conscious of what is that set of workflows, of AI workflows, that we actually invest in. Um, what is it that we actually focus on? So it's not about having a lot of workflows that just flow out of experiments, but also that standardized set. I also see a lot of structure in how we are treating AI logic itself as how we treat code. Like we have, we would put prompts, agent steps, all of this into repositories, versioning controlled, reviews in place. So there is a whole pipeline which exists around this, and I think that also leads us to the whole focus on saying that we have to shift to saying that it needs to be more reliable before we scale. So it's not only about having a bunch of small experiments around, but how does it all come together so that we can scale forward. And so I think there is now more emphasis on putting how you would put your applications through pipelines. You would have the right kind of guardrails, quality checks, quality gates in place. I think a lot of that is also happening with how we are looking at AI workflows and using AI tools in our systems.
Thank you, Harini. So, to add on to that, right, I'd like to invite Rahul, Jaydeep, and Siddhant to share their thoughts.
Okay, so I think Harini brought a really important point. I think real workflows are important. Our ability to like really treat AI as code and then like engineer around it, which means like doing all the life cycles of the engineering aspects. I mean, the real iteration, the pivoting, the learning and bouncing back from failure, the testing part of it, and so on. That's really important. One of the word I think because you started with 2025, I think the most popular word in 2025 was slop. Because when you do mindless experimenting, when you don't keep a check on the outputs, and you just do some easy prompting to generate some output out of AI, what you get is a slop. And nobody wants to pay for slop. No customer, no business user wants to pay for slop. Uh, at the end, I mean, no matter where we are all working for, or people who are attending this event, they are all working for. You are there to like solve some real business problems and deliver some real value. You're not there to like generate just some slop, because AI or AI agents by default can generate that for you. There is the other side of the spectrum, which is opposite of slop, and there is a word for it which is called kino. Now, kino is a German word which means cinema. Cinema is all like doctored. I mean, it's edited, like structured and put it into a situation. I mean, in a state which people want to pay for and consume. And if you can like convert this AI slop or this default AI output to a kino through your engineering, through different guardrails, through a set of practices, I think you can deliver business value. And I think moving from slop to some real like valuable quality outcomes is something that as an industry and as a teams we all have to work towards. Because no matter, I mean, new models will of course come, better capabilities will of course get developed, but how do you like really funnel it down? I think that's where the real engineering is required.
Thanks, Rahul. Siddhant, if you would want to add to this.
Sure, sure. Firstly, thanks a lot, Kavya, and the team for having me here today. And it's a wonderful panel, and my answer more of aligns with what Harini mentioned. So, if I had to say, like in 2020, most teams started playing around with AI like kids. So think of it like they have a chemistry set and they're just playing around, exploring different flavors of innovation, but at the same time you have those occasional explosions as well, because of course you're experimenting, you're trying out things but breaking it at the same time. With the advent of 2026, we've just stepped in, it's 2 months. The industry has already started realizing something important, that AI experiments don't really scale, it's the systems that do. So, if I had to just structure this into three factors, three shifts that I see from my perspective, it is firstly that AI is shifting more from POCs and side projects to actual implementations, actual integrations within the CI/CD pipeline, and becoming part of our SDLC processes. Earlier we used to see that simply people would start using ChatGPT or any similar tool to generate test cases. But now we are seeing AI is integrated deeply into the CI/CD pipelines. We have several ideas, several use cases, like whether it is generating tests, analyzing failures, reviewing pull requests, or even for that matter, like Harini mentioned about guardrails, observability, automatically, like a lot of factors. Second is where we see that teams are shifting more from the model first thinking approach to more of a workflow based approach, where the question now no longer lies between which LLM should we use. It's more towards where in the engineering workflow we see those frictions and where we should focus from a quality or a customer experience point of view. And third, the most important factor is governance and reliability, which I feel has become more mandatory nowadays, because every AI or every LLM that we're using now, we need to add those measures in place. So whether it's an AI eval framework or it's guardrails or some feedback loops, this will help us constantly monitor how the models are giving us the right outputs. Is it improving continuously? And something similar we did with our organization. So building something as part of the AI Center of Excellence and having an internal AI portal that solves multiple use cases. And the philosophy now from 2025 to 26 has been very simple. If I put it in simple terms, let machines handle those repetitive cognitive labor and let engineers focus on the judgment, the creativity, and problem solving. So that shift that we see now from 2025 to 26 is more from experimentation to AI being like an engineering infrastructure, and that's what defines 26.
Thanks, Siddhant. Really appreciate those insights. Over to you, Jaydeep. And Jaydeep, of course, is leading AI in tech at Piramal. So, what is the key changes that your team is basically seeing on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah. Thanks, and thank you for inviting me. And as I'm pretty honored to listen to all of you with all your points. I think this was actually I had in mind as well. But speaking from the perspective of, let's say, something like, if I add what Harini and Siddhant was mentioning, right? There is one more aspect. So we started with figuring out that AI can basically code. Then came vibe code. Then we realized vibe code is nothing. It can't go to production. How to make to production? The era that I see right now, and even in our organizations we're practicing as well, is basically that can uh, taking vibe code to production is different than making something useful, if I put that way, right? So I think that's one of the genuine shift, apart from what like Harini, Siddhant, and Rahul was mentioning, that building the right thing, right? I think I see a lot of companies, including our company as well. We're going a lot more deeper into figuring out that, are we building the thing that is needed by people, whether it is our tech team, whether it is our end users, our customers, because we genuinely had a lot of challenges. We built 4 or 5 things amazingly, and then we figured out that it doesn't work because people are not using it, right? So it's not useful. So I think this is what, in my opinion, people are actually, organizations are actually also monitoring that, do I actually need to build it, right? People are saying that, okay, agents. I hope people are also getting into the fact that, hey, um, do we need agents in everything, right? There are many cases where we probably don't need agents, and identifying this has become, in my opinion, a part of SDLC, right? It's different from requirement, by the way. If you ask me, it's different from requirement gathering. Is more of like a user testing that needs to be done to identify what people actually want, right? Which is coming to our QA team as well, our dev teams as well, when we are trying to figure out, for example, we use Klein and Claude for the last 2 years for our coding. There are many things came, Cursor came, Windsurf came. We kept quiet because we didn't we didn't think that more tools, more confusions. Is there anything extra that these tools bring us? Maybe not. We tried to create a framework or mental model for ourselves for any kind of thing that we want to catch up, right? And that's, in my opinion, is also one of the key parts, apart from all the points that everybody mentioned. Um, um, Also, I think one other point, in my opinion, why people are actually taking more and more things to production is that um, I think everybody writes, like at least 80 to 90% companies write codes with AI now, whether it's a dev team or a QA team. But I think there is a specific standardization that people are trying to bring, right? So, for example, here we also check in our prompts as a code. So we treat our prompts as a code, so that how developers are interacting with AI, there is a standardized version to it, right? So that also gets checked in. That also gets a quality gate in the pipeline as well. Pipeline also breaks because of that as well. So yeah, just wanted to add these 2 points apart from all the things I mentioned.
Thank you, Jaydeep. Appreciate the insights, I think. And listening to your points, I'm pretty sure that our audience is able to take a lot of takeaways, of course, insights, of course, but also hard relate to things that you've been sharing for sure. Because when AI came into picture, it was definitely, as Siddhant mentioned, right? It was definitely like a toy. There was a lot of discovery element that was going on, and yeah, I hope that our audience is able to listen into this and able to also understand how essentially are you figuring this out as you scale the system. Moving on to the next bit of it, right? For years, the testing pyramid has, of course, guided how teams can think about quality. With AI now generating tests, analyzing failures, and of course, assisting across the pipeline, how do you think AI is reshaping the testing pyramid and overall testing strategy? Siddhant, if you may answer this.
Yeah, sure, Kavya. So the testing pyramid, I believe, has served us really well for a decade or more. Lots of unit tests, fewer integration tests, and then even fewer UI tests. Of course, everyone knows how the test pyramid is designed, but now with AI, the advent of AI, it's kind of destroying the way pyramid is formed, and it's bending it a bit. So historically, if I just say that UI tests were expensive because they were fragile, brittle, and slow to maintain. But now with AI assisted test generation, self healing, you have intelligent selectors that um, the entire maintenance cost of all these higher layers is slowly but surely decreasing, is what I see. And meanwhile, AI is also making unit tests much easier to generate, but harder to trust, like just go in the flow, trust it blindly. So something interesting that is happening in this space, like the future looks less like a rigid pyramid and more of like you can think of it in the form of a mesh, a complete testing intelligence mesh. Firstly, AI generated tests are at multiple layers simultaneously. Models can generate unit tests, API tests, contracts. Risk based test orchestration is another thing that's increasing. And instead of running everything every time, AI systems are now deciding which tests are really important based on the code that changes. So you have ideas, you have things like you can simply ask it to read a Jira description, understand the acceptance criteria, and see what exact code changes you want to modify, because you now understand the intent behind it, and just review PRs based on that. Third, like I mentioned earlier, was feedback loops. AI is analyzing your production telemetry, logs, incidents. You can perform root cause analysis, and there's so many use cases. So the pyramid has become so dynamic after all these changes with the intent of AI coming in. What I feel, you can think of it this way, that traditional testing was more of coverage driven, but with modern AI assisted testing, it's becoming more focused on risk driven approach and a more intelligent behavior that goes along with it. So the goal is better signals from the right test at the right time.
Thanks, Siddhant. Harini, if you might be able to add to this.
Yeah, I think I totally hear what Siddhant is saying, and I can absolutely like relate to that. I just want to say that this question is very interesting for me personally, because
Mhm.
whoever has worked with me in the past would know that I've been a big advocate of the testing pyramid. But that's also because, not because the testing pyramid had to ever be rigid about being a pyramid, it opened up questioning the values behind it, to say
Mhm.
that what is the most pragmatic way of approaching this. So if we were talking about a very ideal green field kind of a situation, we would just go with the coverage of a pyramid. And if you're, let's say, like I've done a lot of consulting in my yesteryears, so as you will see that when you're not really in the most ideal situation, you'll say, okay, so it makes sense to bend it a little bit, because it's just how we are set up right now, without losing the values that the pyramids a whole idea was, which is, I think, important to still keep in mind. Because the pyramid's values or principles were about fast feedback, failing fast, writing more stable tests which are closer to the code, reducing the signal to noise ratio. And I think that reliability model that it would make you think about, I think that's still valid. Um, so I'm not saying that we have to stay with the pyramid. I think we have to stay with the values of the pyramid, because with AI coming in, of course, there are a lot of things which have changed. Like what Siddhant was saying, that it has become easier to generate more tests. So it's also cheaper to produce more tests, right? Earlier, the number of people, the going back and forth on the model and saying that have we actually thought through all kinds of tests in here, all of that has become much cheaper to produce with AI in the mix. It's also so our shift has more gone from, are we writing good tests, to actually saying that now that we have so many tests, are we actually looking at the tests which are giving signal, as I think Siddhant used also. So it's about saying that how do we use AI to say, for example, can we run more adaptive tests, right? Can we actually use AI to choose the tests based on the diff that is coming in, the changes that are happening? So can we write more change aware tests, more risk based tests, right? So it kind of helps thinking about it, rather than, as Siddhant was again saying, rather than talking about a rigid pyramid in place. So in my opinion, I think the layers still exist. I mean, the layers of saying that you have these unit tests at the bottom, and then you have integration tests. But the integration tests now can be more adaptive. They can be more change aware. If you're, in fact, if you're writing, or if you're testing an AI generated code or software, integration becomes extremely important, because that's where you would expect things to break more. Rather than the good code that usually AI would write. Then you come down to another level, which I think this layer did not exist earlier, which is about agent level or workflow level tests, if you have them in place also. So this can be about how do you have tool use, how do you plan, so you're now testing those things also. And of course you have your end-to-end test, which can now be again fewer, more scenario focused, more risk focused. I think that is I think some of the behavior changes that come in with AI in the mix.
Yeah.
Thanks, Harinee. Yeah, anyone else would want to share insights on this? Yeah.
I just want to add a couple of lines because I think like really great points, and I think that brings one more point. I think this like the concept of pyramid, in my opinion, basically doesn't go away. It
Mhm.
stays, right? To be very fair, it becomes more honest, more basically brutally honest. I can say that way, right? So the principle remains the same as Heidi was also mentioning, and Siddhartha was mentioning, that you push your confidence downward, the faster test goes down and your end to end comes at the top. And Harini also mentioned that what type of end to end. But I think one of the things that we have been noticing, because we have AI, we sometimes end up with 5,000, 6,000 tests, right? Because it can write test. Do you keep on increasing your bottom layer? Maybe not, right? So I believe that the change that comes to the pyramid is also evaluate the pyramid with like time to time, right? That are you writing the test that matters, Like, just because AI can write 5,000 tests, don't put 5,000 tests in your unit level, right? Because you don't need those. And if you ask AI for volume, it will give you volume, and more volume, more confusion, and more failures as well. So that eval part, I just wanted to bring this up, that maybe you need to evaluate time to time your pyramid with AI writing your tests.
Great insights, folks. Great. So moving on to the next aspect of it, right? Many teams are, of course, running pilots with AI tooling, but only a few use cases actually scale well in production environments. In fact, I was looking at this and I just saw that there's been a question at how the panel over here has in fact even taken AI agents to production at scale. So I think right on time. What When teams are moving from pilots to real adoption, which AI use cases in testing have delivered the most practical value in your experience? Rahul, if you may answer this.
Yeah. So I just want to talk about two scales.
Mhm.
which we have to like really see when we talk about tech work. A lot of time people think that tech work is just like coding work or like writing a program to do certain kind of stuff. But tech work, it has a scale of things. Tech work is could be a lot of social work, which means like dealing with real people, their real expectations, their real problems, and then translating it to some real like problem statements and tasks and milestones to work on. So like one spectrum is a social part of it, another is a very siloed part of it, that like once you break down this social part, people can then work on the siloed parts. Another part is that like one part of testing is a lot of algorithmic and procedural. For example, when we talk about test automation, when we are talking about these pipelines, these are all algorithmic and procedural things that like once you build A to B, do C and do this activity. But there is also another side of testing and engineering, which is more very creative and exploratory and more of heuristic driven rather than like driven by some algorithm. And AI is best suited, the best use cases of AI you will find for areas which are both algorithmic as well as siloed. So if you have well-defined problem statement, greenfield areas, which people call it, that we know what has to be done, less ambiguity, and what has to be done is highly algorithmic, procedural, you can delegate it to a machine. These use cases will fare out very well for AI. Typical examples, for example, documentation, looking into different class files and then like creating some kind of a document out of it, or some kind of even diagramming you can do to certain degree. For example, from looking at a class, you have to create certain kind of mermaids or certain kind of sequence diagrams. You can use AI to do all of that. We are trying that for certain use cases, working out pretty well with and of course we also know like for these kind of diagrammings, AI cannot like really help us because they are more like creative aspects to it or social aspects to it, or things like boilerplate coding, or just extending the scripts or day-to-day script writing work. If you want, you have a model and you want it to do all of that, these kind of tasks will fare out very well. But like if you are trying something which is more social in nature or more creative in nature, and you want to like create AI and deploy AI to that, maybe AI is not the best thing for that. Yeah, for example, like this kind of summit that we are doing, it's a very social kind of a thing. It's very creative, exploratory, this panel discussion. And I don't think even in 5 years, this panel discussion is going to get replaced by an AI agent. So I think understanding that spectrum is important. Yeah, that's pretty much.
Hopefully.
Hopefully, yeah. I was about to say because mold book was all over the internet. I was just thinking about how agents are interacting. So yeah, wondering if they'd hold such
So are
conversations.
people going to pay to see mold book and
That's
similar
what.
kind of things?
Very interesting. Yeah. Yes, very interesting point. Siddhant, if you may add to this.
Sure, Kavya. So this, in fact, to Rahul's point, I mean, I never imagined we'll have a panel where AI agents will take over. So that's really interesting, but hopeful. And I just can recollect Jaydeep's point to the first response where he mentioned like there are a lot of AI demos that we generally work on. We do, they look magical, but then finally they fall apart in production. So in practice, there are only a few use cases which I believe consistently delivered that value that we see. Of course, there's been a lot of enhancements, a lot of changes that by the time we launch a new demo, we work on a POC and take it live to production, there are already changes to the same. So the very first practical use case, which I feel at least for this, is test generation, which we all believe from specifications or code changes. AI just sets those, rather generates those baseline unit tests, the API test, and a lot of these edge cases, boundary cases, your security cases that we generally as humans tend to skip in the early phases. We focus more on the happy parts because of urgent releases, different reasons. And engineers then start reviewing and refining them once AI generates this. So this at least dramatically accelerates the way that our coverage expands for testing. The second that I feel is failure triage and root cause analysis, because of course, like every single company gets incidents at some point. We are not 100% a foolproof engineers who cannot miss a single bug in production. So of course there are those incidents that we need to start analyzing, and I feel as machines, they can just start reading your logs, analyzing them, looking at stack traces and the historical failures, and help identify those probable causes and issues that we can address immediately and improve our testing cycles. The third is definitely PRs and code review process, because AI assistants, like I just mentioned earlier, they've identified these test gaps, those missing assertions, or any security issues that we might have just simply missed before we merge code. So that is definitely one. Lastly, you can think of test maintenance, self-healing, automation, and flaky test has been like one of those silent killers as part of our CI pipelines. So imagine when your AI models just detect those unstable selectors or timing issues or patterns that simply are breaking your test suits, and stabilize them in a quick way. And yeah, just coming back to what Jaydeep also mentioned, like instead of running like 10,000 tests, AI can simply recommend those maybe 1,200 most relevant tests based on code impact analysis. And I think what really matters is not flashy demos, but more of how AI is giving that measurable engineering value. So
Mm-hmm.
you can think of it like a pattern where AI scales, but it augments the engineering decisions, and not trying to replace your full stack engineers, like full stack quality engineers. So that's me.
Thanks, Siddhant. Harini, if you may add to these points, please.
Yeah, I think a lot of what both Rahul and Siddhant have said are very valid. It's just that when Rahul mentioned about creativity, it took me back to my first interview, like my own interview when I was interviewing to become a QA. And I remember that there was a lot of emphasis on actually coming up with creative test cases rather than saying that, do you know the semantics and the syntaxes of writing automation code, right? And that was also something that I was always talk about, that that is what sets a QA apart, that is what makes us better, because we understand the the conjunction between business and technology, and what actually matters, and how to think about the economics of testing. And I think so when it comes to scaling with AI, right, all of these examples are very valid, but when we talk about creativity, I think it's also about, it's something that I think will change as we go forward. This is my opinion and my vision. I think that there is probably so much learning that our models have, and they're more deterministic based on, okay, if we have, let's say, a login page, there are these 10 things that one would obviously be looking for, right? But the more business complexities come in, the more things get added to this, the more layers that are there, the industry, the domain, the regulations, all of these things keep adding in. It becomes harder to rely. And I think that will change, though. I think that shifting this to context, and context awareness for how we write our workflows or our agents, that can shift this. So today, is that something that we can scale with? Maybe not, but I do think that we will get to a point where we become better at this and we are able to shift things more left and make sure that the kind of value that we're getting out of agents creatively also is something that we get out of this. I also, like, I don't want to repeat any of the points which have already been said, but a big plus one to all of them. I just think that there is also one more thing, that because you've spoken about scale in your question, right? I just want to also highlight that when we talk of test strategies, right? Now we won't create test strategy at scale. Like, we won't have a lot of test strategies, but with scale, our test strategies would keep evolving, because there is a lot of evolution that will happen at in different ways when you scale, right? So I think that that is also something that we should look at utilizing AI for. How do we evolve with the changes that are happening? How do we make sure that we are in line with the evolution that are happening when there is scale? So I think test strategy is usually a forgotten child who gives a lot of value as well. So I think that is one more point that I would add to all the other great points here.
Thank you so much, Harinee, Rahul, and Siddhant. Really appreciate it. And I think speaking of, measuring the matrices, we were talking about the scalability part of it, right? In fact, all of this leads to one important thing, which is basically measurement, right? So once AI becomes part of the engineering pipeline itself, measurement just becomes extremely important, can't be overlooked at all. So would be great if you can share with the audience what are the matrices that teams should be tracking to know that AI is actually improving quality outcomes rather than simply generating more tests or additional noise. I think Jaydeep had already put this across in a previous, answer, that more we don't want more tests and more noise. So, what is it that we could do, Jaydeep, in such cases? What are the matrices that teams could track per se?
Yeah. I think this question was really well curated after the previous question. I think that's a nice segue to this. But again, I'll reiterate, even though I said this, like, it's not like a poetry competition that I have written that many poetries as a QAs. It's about I know that we even I've spent like as a like almost like I still consider myself as a QA because I put my nose everywhere. But the thing is that I think beyond the things that we used to measure, that okay, what is my automation coverage, how much functional tests are automated, what is my how are my performance tests saying? I think imagine in today's world, in my opinion, there are people are trying to bring AI uh, even into a system where AI is not needed. When I'm talking about the business, right? So how often you get to hear that, hey, can we put a chatbot in our website? Maybe there are some values, there are sometimes there are no values, but let's say that there are values, and how do you measure it, right? Because the moment you put this, I think Rahul was mentioning in the first question as well, that we entered the world of non-deterministic. And when we enter the world of non-deterministic, things get a lot more trickier than something like today morning I was going through some questions in LinkedIn, and someone was mentioning that expected result equal to expected equal to actual is no longer true anymore, right? So it's more like a it used to be like a vending machine. If I put 10 rupees for a Coke, I know that I get a Coke. But now it has become like a slot machine. If I put 10 rupees and I hope for a something like a cherry to win like the jackpot, it may or may not happen. So that's where the non-deterministic thing kind of comes in. So coming back to some of the measures, which sounds behavioral, but there is a way to make it analytical as well. One bucket is on business outcomes, right? For QAs, what I mean is that with all the quality safety net that I have created, whether it's my automation testing, my manual testing, my exploratory testing that I have done, are my defect escapes to production has reduced, right? Then things like, for example, am I going to production faster with a quality secured software or not, right? So things like this really matter, because in non-deterministic way, it's not the usual way you actually go ahead and actually compare expected versus actual. You rather play with the link between expected and actual. These type of expected question might give you this type of actual answers. Now your uh, testing also should become kind of a non-deterministic way, but again, as a quality, you can't leave it as a non-deterministic. You need to come up with certain things. From the perspective of the bucket, if I think of like test system, that am I reducing my flaky test? And now if my AI is generating, as I was saying, let's say 5,000, 10,000 tests, it's bound to be you bound to find more flaky test into this structure, right? But a count of, is my flaky test getting reduced or not, right? And I think another measure could be what Harini was mentioning, signal to noise. Now noise, I'm pretty sure all of us would have faced that. The alarm system will give you the, like when I say alarm system in the analogy of QA test suite, is going to give you the same alarm for uh, a simple theft in your house or a great burglary in your house. And that's where the team lose faith in it, right? Like for example, let's say, acha, test failed, okay, let me figure out why this suite failed, blah blah blah, and then I figure out, acha, that's okay, right? Now imagine this keep on happening over and over of time, that you will become frustrated. So that signal to noise, I think one of the things that also needs to be measured. Now, coming back to AI writing code is another measure that we have to keep. That, for example, how many times I am accepting the code that is written by AI, right? Is it being reviewed by AI? So, in our case, we actually has whenever an agent, let's say when I say agent, I mean real agent. We needed a coding agent out here is writing a piece of code, or is actually fixing a bug that was raised in Jira. We tag it as AI done, right? So that we can create a filter of how many of these are fixed by AI, and then human in the loop is always there. Rahul was also mentioning, we also have this, we don't trust it. So the MR that is raised by an AI agent is validated by a developer, an actual developer or a QA. Now how many times the developer or QA doesn't have to even touch the code, right? What is that matrix? Is it increasing? For example, for Piramal today, it is close to 14%, I think, that the developers don't even have to touch the code. Around 70 to 80% cases, they have to keep talking with client or cursor, or I'm just, for us it is client, for anybody it can be cursor, to fix that thing a little bit more. And then 10% cases, we know that AI can't do it at all. Even that doesn't matter how you can speak to it for another 6 months, it will not going to fix it, at least with the current capability. So that is also kind of gives you confidence that where AI is going and what are the things that you need to keep in mind. So I think if I just summarize in a way, I think we don't ask questions like, uh, did AI generate more, right? We kind of ask questions like, did engineering get safer or not, right? Did engineering, if you are in Piramal, did engineering got calmer or not? Are there less tension on the team's head to release something or not, right? Because as I was saying in the previous answer as well, that if you ask for volume, AI is going to give you volume. But if your question is, or your matrix is trust, then you can have an intelligent conversation with AI to basically get that trust out.
Oh, very interesting. Our Mudit, who's basically head of growth and co-founder at TestMe, recently gave a talk on the future of trust, and the key insight or the takeaway in it was that how quality engineering, in fact, especially given the agentic AI world, right? The future of trust is basically the foundation for that in itself is a strong QA function to begin with. Siddhant, if you might have something to add to what Jaydeep mentioned.
Sure. So I think Jaydeep just covered everything what I had to say. Testing signal to noise ratio, I think that is one of the key metrics, because like Jaydeep just mentioned, if you ask AI, it will generate thousands of tests, and that may sound impressive, but if maximum of those are just useless, we have automated noise, and that's what we don't want. So our teams need to focus more on those quality outcomes than just measuring what AI outputs you. So few other things that I would add to what Jaydeep mentioned is definitely the defect detection effectiveness, because the way that we can identify and catch those defects much earlier than what we used to do in our traditional processes, I think that will really impact a lot with the advent of AI. Second is, again, I just come back to root cause analysis, because I think it's a very important factor when we get incidents reported through customers. So the main time to root cause analysis, I think that's a new measure that can be introduced. Like, how quickly can teams understand that something broke and we can fix that as soon as possible. Third is, in terms of regression cycles, like how long it takes for your issues or your changes to roll out to production, and has AI reduced that cycle time. And you also have like a developer tester productivity ratio, because we all know that as engineers, spending lesser time writing those boilerplate tests and focusing more on those creative solutions, like designing meaningful scenarios and getting them out onto production, I think that is where the real value is. So if AI reduces that repetitive work, engineers can definitely spend more time on creative problem solving. Something that we do as part of our own AI Center of Excellence efforts, we measure something that is called as the engineering cognitive load reduction. So that's the metric that truly tells you what AI, whether AI is working or not. Yeah.
Thanks, Siddhant and Jaydeep. Really appreciate those insights. So moving on to this next question, right? Beyond tools itself, AI is beginning to in fact change the daily work of test engineers. Where are you seeing the biggest changes in areas like test design, failure analysis, regression testing, or even, for instance, risk identification? Rahul, if you may be able to answer this.
AI has certainly changed how people do testing fundamentally. Especially, for example, I work in a product company, IFM, and we have a lot of testers who are working on like individual products or projects. So
Yep.
it's not like really big teams, but like maybe one tester, two tester working on a specific project. Today, I see, every tester now today has a brainstorming partner to bounce back some ideas, to critique them, help them brainstorm. Every tester can build some assistance to them. There was a time when people used to feel that, can we have an intern, can we have an assistant, can we get a support of another member for some time? Today, that thing is possible with AI. You can like design certain agents, you can use AI as a brainstorming partner, you can use AI to critique your own outputs. For example, when I make my own presentations, I like sometimes paste screenshots of it and then I ask AI that critique this or help me refine it better. Because we all require like, even like as testers, we all need that testing loop to help us improve our own work. And we need that testing loop when we are even doing the test design or failure analysis, or when we are doing the regression, or maybe what are the areas which we are probably missing. One thing, for example, I'll give you an example. I've created an agent for bug advocacy, which when I give it a bug, it also shares me three instances. It looks up in the web for three instances where such a bug has caused potential problems in the world, which helps me make a better case. It also gives me three bug retesting ideas that I just paste it along with my bug report, that the developer can then try out after they fix the bug. And that makes like the workflow a lot different compared to how typically or traditionally we used to raise bugs with expected actual and then the story used to end, because everything and anything that we like the tester used to put in a bug report was a cost. Because it used to consume time and so on. Yeah.
Thanks, Rahul. Harini, if you might be able to add to this.
Yeah, I think, I mean, if I look at it at a meta level, right, one of the things that I think is that with AI coming in, one role that I think has definitely increased it is of validators. Like now that they, when I say validators, it's not about generating code or in a way that you write good Java code or Golang or with the right kind of functional or solid principles or etc. All of that is not the point anymore, right? Now it's about validations from the part of saying that what we get as an output, is it actually sticking to the area that we care about. So and given that AI has the nature of being probabilistic or non-deterministic, I think a lot of the test engineering definitely, if not already has done this, then it needs to start looking at evals as a part, right, to
Yeah.
contain all of this. So I think whether it is testing, and when I say testing, I don't mean just QAs. It could be security analysts, it could be devs as analysts. It's about the archetype or the hat that you're wearing. But the whole point about validations, that is something that has become definitely more in the flow of test engineering, that matters. So yes, regression outputs. I think use cases that I've also seen is debugging. Becomes more uh, easier because it's more interactive. You can actually, whether you have a pair or not, it's easier to work with these systems. And RCA, as Siddhant was also saying. But I also think the word risk is extremely important, because that becomes extremely central to what you as validators can also bring into the picture, right? So I think just more dynamic risk based thinking, making it more continuous, and making sure that AI can highlight brittle modules, it can bring in high change areas, but then what gets missing is that how do you make sure that you're thinking about risk more continuously and feeding that back into the system. So some of this, I think, has changed and modified how test engineering is. But there's also a flip side to all of this, I think, because now it's about, like what everybody was talking about, JD and others, that it's also about testing the tests now, right? Like, if it's and the faith that you have on it, how do you improve that? That has become an additional overhead of sorts, if you may call it that. This is something that we need to be also thinking about, because now it's about seeing that it is failing for the right reasons. It is not brittle in itself, when it is doing its checks. So I do see a lot of change where people have started making the systems give evidence, like more evidence based testing from AI workflows, like show me the logs, or if something has happened, prove it that it has actually happened. So that evidence-based testing also has something. I mean, something that we probably didn't do it in the way that we have been doing traditionally. But I think it has got added because of the non-deterministic nature of AI in the workflow and the chain and the cycles.
Thanks, Harinee. And Siddhant and Jaydeep, if you could, of course, add a quick one-line
Yeah.
sentences to this. Yeah.
So I think Harini and Rahul covered everything, but just something that I woke up to today morning was, and that made me happy, was OpenAI's acquisition of Prompt4. I'm sure most of you all read that. So I think when Harini mentioned about testing evals, that is really critical. And like from strategies to literally risk-based testing, this is something that matters a lot when you're using AI, because the hardest part that has been for quality engineering was never writing test. It was always knowing what to test, and I think AI helps to get closer to that answer. So that's just my one liner.
Yeah. I think, yeah, all great points are covered. But I think if I just look at this way, that we as a tester, we have been actually testing the obvious for ages. Like that is, if I do this, it is supposed to happen. Again, I'm reiterating the same thing that I said. All these things, what is like, the AI is actually helping us to spend more time in looking at something that is not obvious in details. If is something silently failing or not, right? Which is beyond your infrastructure might be good, your test might be good, your code might be good, but behind the scene, because of the non-deterministic nature, something might be failing, which if escapes might ruins someone's life, right? So I think I want to add this part to it, that I think the biggest power that QA's got is to spend time and creativity in finding out what is silently failing.
Makes a lot of sense. Yeah, very powerful too. Great. Thank you so much, folks, for sharing those insights. Moving on to the next question, right? Many AI initiatives that start as promising pilots. In fact, we've already have touched upon a bit of it in the subsequent, in the previous answers. But that, when AI came up, we of course started building those AI initiative projects and so on, right? A lot of them were like very promising pilots, but then struggle when teams try to scale them across larger systems and organizations. What are the biggest challenges that teams face when trying to operationalize AI in their testing pipelines? Rahul and Siddhant, if you could answer these, please.
Rahul,
One
you
second. Rahul, seems like you're. Uh,
Yeah. So, I'll try to keep it very brief, very short answer. That like when I see teams scaling, I think this is not just like the challenge with AI, but like in general, if you want to scale testing, you need partners like Lambda Test is one who can like support you with such kind of infrastructure and a system. So I think like a lot of times like people start thinking that like they are creating a small POC or a small project, but then like when they want to scale it, it's not possible. And the reason is, the strategy or the foundations that you require to build a house is very different from the foundations that you require to build a big infrastructure or a big maybe building of 20 to 30 50 floors. And I think if like somebody is really serious about scaling, I think they should think about like the right infrastructure partners, the right scaling partner, the right reliability partners, because alone you cannot like really scale. Yeah.
Thanks, Rahul. Siddhant?
Yeah. So, what I would say is mainly AI pilots, what I believe, fail because of the way organizations underestimate the way the engineering discipline that is required. So, it's more of around four challenges that I see. One is from the point of view of data quality. AI systems, believe, depend heavily on historical test data, logs, telemetry, and stuff. And if that data itself is messy or incomplete, AI becomes unreliable, as we all know. So, firstly, it is important that for any model, for any AI solution that you use, you make sure that it is accurate, it is well trained, it has all the relevant information so that it can get you the right output. Second is the eval frameworks. Teams often deploy AI without measuring its accurateness, faithfulness by several metrics that are readily available. And model benchmarking is very essential in that case. Third is tool sprawl. Teams experiment with so many, like dozens of AI tools, but then they fail to integrate them into actual workflows. So that's where we see a lot of challenges. Another thing is when we talk about trust or adoption, because engineers generally they won't rely on AI if its behavior is too unpredictable. We have seen challenges where teams don't adopt so easily. They still stick to their comfort zones where they have solutions existing in place and things are working for them, as compared to adopting AI and getting solutions right there. And that's why when we built an internal portal, like call it the Atlas, it's a centralized platform that rather than isolated tests, it just orchestrates multiple use cases, and it allows us to standardize several AI capabilities. It enforces like evaluation, governance, and it also scales those use cases across so many teams. So scaling that AI, I feel requires treating it like a software infrastructure than thinking of it as just a gadget.
Very well put. Thank you so much, Siddhant. Um, I really appreciate all the insights that's coming up. I'd of course want to take more questions from the audience. Unfortunately, to the audience, I'd like to say that because of the time constraints, right, we would only be able to answer these questions virtually, perhaps. But yeah, before we wrap up the panel, right, I'd like to end with a one quick final question for each of our panelists. If you had to give one practical piece of advice to the teams who want to successfully adopt AI in their testing workflows in 2026, right, what would that be? So let's go by the order that I see on the screen. Rahul, if you could take this
Uh,
up first.
I've also dropped it on the chat because I know it's we are short. Execution from if you subtract execution from learning, what you have is just rotten knowledge. Unless you execute, all this learning is a waste. It will anyhow fade away. So execute, apply, have a cohort group, have a group of people who want to apply, and like just like do things rather than listening to people about how to do things. You will, मतलब फल आपको कर्मों के मिलेंगे.
Yeah. To the audience that's not able to understand Hindi, he means that you'll basically get what you uh, deserve. Is that right? Or what you would get basically
You
what
will
you're
only
on
reap
the
the
basis of your
fruits of the
actions.
hard work that you do,
Yeah, the
not
based on your
about,
actions.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Thanks, Rahul. Siddhant, if you could go next.
Sure. I would say start with a workflow problem than thinking of which AI tool to use. So, firstly, ask the right questions like where do engineers lose most of their time? Where are the pipelines slow? Where do bugs escape frequently? Then introduce AI exactly where it removes that friction. So, that way, what happens is your AI adoption also succeeds where there are painful engineering problems and not when you just have to showcase some new technology to your business, because at the end of the day, AI in testing is not about just replacing engineers. It's about giving them superpowers, becoming assistants, and solving their special areas where they feel a lot of challenges, making them more productive. And humans, when they have this curiosity and collaborations with machines, I think there are endless possibilities. So yeah, that's my final take.
Thanks, Siddhant. Harini, over to you.
I would be very pointed because I think that this is extremely important for if most of our audience are from QA background. Then I would say that if you haven't started exploring evals, yeah, definitely do that because that is a no-brainer. I mean, you cannot go with your traditional ways of testing when it comes to AI systems. And the other quick thing that I would say is that the value that you're getting in is the risk-based thinking that we have been talking about earlier also. So think about risk. You cannot, as if you're not doing that, you can't empathize with the outputs that actually come out of AI too, and what all you can be considering, thinking about your expansion goes much beyond what we have been looking at so far. So I think those two things I would say definitely look at 2026.
Thanks, Harini. Jaydeep, over to you.
Yeah, I think all great points plus one to everything that Rahul, Siddhant, and Harini said. I think, in my opinion, uh, we also need to learn the systems well, like especially for the systems which we are building. If it's an AI system, so we spoke about AI in testing, but testing AI is a different ball game, right? So, for example, when we wrote our API test suite or backend test suite, we learned about how does it work, like let's say how does a REST API work, or if you are old enough, then how does soap work, or GraphQL works. Because once we know this, it will be easier for us to also break it, right? And unfortunately here the learning curve is a little bit more than what we learned before. And it is important saying this because again, I want to bring this perspective out here is that uh, previously, if a login doesn't work, you'll maybe a big customer will be losing $1 million, right? But here, if the expected output doesn't work, uh, someone might not get a loan. Someone's someone who is asked for a student loan might not get that. If something goes wrong, someone who is up for a job may not get that job. and all these things requires just a small tweak. So I think there are capability or skill stack that needs to be added to a QA's tool stack, and one of those is bias testing, in my opinion. So we should be doing this bias testing because, trust me, I'm just tweaking the example, but a resume was uploaded for someone called James.
Mhm.
Job is done, but James changed to Jane. Job, exact same resume, job was not granted by the recommendation system, right? So I think this will get more clearer if we actually go a little deeper into it. How does this work? How does this models work? How does this supervised model work? Where the data come from? So I, with all the points that Siddhant, Rahul, and Harinee added, I will also request people to basically go ahead and learn these systems before we actually go ahead and test it. Uh, because otherwise it's a socio-technical problem, in my opinion. If you ask me, it's not a technical problem to solve.
Thank you so much, everyone. Really appreciate all these great insights that we've got so far. And of course, we have to the audience. Please stay in touch with our panelists. Rahul has, of course, added his LinkedIn over here. I'll just make sure that I am putting it here again in case you missed it. I've added everyone's here just in case you can stay in touch with them and see what are the insights that they have to share with you. To our panelists, thank you so much for all the insights, Harinee, Jaydeep, Rahul, and Siddhant. Really, really appreciate it. Thank you for taking the time out on a weekday to share insights as part of the Spartan Summit. To our audience, really appreciate all the questions that you shared. Unfortunately, we couldn't answer it, but yeah, we'll be sharing it with our panelists, and we'll see how we can send those answers back to you. If you found the discussion valuable, do share your learnings with your network using hashtag Spartan Summit. Thank you once again, everyone. Really, really appreciate it, and enjoy the rest of the Spartan Summit. Have a good day, everyone. Thanks, Rahul.
Thank
Siddhant.
you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank
Great
you.
questions, by the way. Thank you.
Thank you.